Hello, legendary listeners, and welcome to the Legendary Ladies podcast. I am your host, Amy, with my co host, Morgan.
Hello.
Kat is out this week because, surprise, surprise, she's doing another Kickstarter. And as you can imagine, Kat's, if you haven't seen recently, Kat's Kickstarters continue to kick butt. Like every time she does a Kickstarter, man, boom, 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 boom. So she and Phil are working hard on that Kickstarter. But Morgan and I are here tonight because we're doing the pilot pod that I wanted to do since it came out, which is for fellow travelers.
I'm okay. So I'm so fascinated. Okay. Because my husband was like, why did Amy pick this one? And I was like, honestly, I can't wait to ask her because when you first told me what the show was, I
Yeah.
immediately was like, it's about time travel. I'm so hyped. It's Matt Bomer. He's time traveling. He's romancing men through the ages or something. I didn't know what it
And
was about, and that's
and
not what
Kat's
it's
like,
about.
it's got sci-fi in it. So for the longest time, these girls didn't want to do it because they didn't watch the show because Kat was like, it's got to be sci-fi. It's called Fellow Travelers. It
I actually
sounds like
think
sci-fi.
it does
It
sound like
does.
sci-fi. I will say,
That's
I
fair.
actually think it's kind of it's good for Kat that she didn't have to watch this because I don't think she would have enjoyed it at
Really?
all. I don't think so. I really don't. And
I
maybe we force her to watch it at some point and get her
oh,
take because I feel like it was first of all it was like a little bit on the slower side pacing wise, and it's about history.
that
So
is true. So it does have history, but here's why I chose to watch it.
because
First
everybody in it
off,
is so beautiful.
yes.
Yes.
So here's first off, disclaimer. If you are listening, first off, we do have Patreon listeners who have joined us, so we're going to be
Yes, we
referencing a
do.
couple of them in the chat. If you would like to become a Patreon, you can visit patreon.com/the legendary ladies, and if you are at a certain level, you get to join us live as we record and join in. Um, Second, this is going to be a spoiler-filled podcast, only for the pilot.
Only for the
I
pilot.
might reference maybe a couple things because I've seen a few episodes more, but I've actually not seen
Oh,
all the way through yet
okay.
because my Paramount Plus subscription expired and I couldn't
No.
restart it.
I
Yeah,
I got
so
I have
but
to be honest, I thought that this was, like, one of those ones that you needed to have the Showtime add-on for, and
mm-hmm.
at least for the pilot, I was able to watch it with just my Paramount Plus. So
That's because Paramount Plus with Showtime is the one that they like. If you click subscribe just on this one, it automatically does the with Showtime. It
huh.
it sneaks it in there. So you'll want to go back and
Hmm.
double check. I
I
had that issue
I
too.
might need to, yeah. Well,
Uh-huh.
we were actually we were already subscribed to Paramount Plus because we joke that we are subscribed to every single subscription service that you
Mm-hmm.
can possibly be subscribed to, and then because I'm terrible at canceling subscriptions, I stay
Mm-hmm.
subscribed to them for the rest of
Oh.
my life. So,
So then when the price went up a couple months ago, they automatically bumped you up to the with Showtime one.
oh come on, oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely what
Yeah.
happened.
That's
Well,
which is why I canceled
I
mine
guess
because
I
I was
have
like, I'm here for
Showtime
Star
now.
Trek only. But yeah, no. So here's the thing. First off, this is going to be a spoiler-filled podcast for the pilot. Second, we're not going to be shy. There was some
Stuff happened.
very hot action in this.
Oh, it was
So like
spicy.
there's a very specific reason why I chose to
Was it the
watch this.
spiciness?
It was so I am single, okay?
That's
And the trailers popped up and it
yeah.
says fellow travelers. I think it's a time travel show. So I clicked
Who
the trailer
wouldn't?
and I'm watching
Yeah.
it, I'm watching it, I'm watching it. I'm going, oh, this is kind of spicy. And then Matt Bomer, who is like god tier on my level of gorgeous men for me.
I was trying to explain to Mike like how attractive Matt Bomer is, and I was like, it's like
Eyes.
he's not a human being. It's like he's transcended a level of being. Looking directly at Matt Bomer is almost uncomfortable, like looking directly at the sun, like he's too powerful. It's like, how are you this good looking? And also,
Uh-huh.
he. Obviously been watching stuff with Matt Bomer since way back in White Castle, White
White Castle,
Collar.
white
Uh,
collar, but that's funny.
imagine if it was all about White Castle. And has he aged at all, Amy? He looks
I don't
the
understand.
same. I don't understand.
And
White Collar was like 10 years ago at least.
and then they had to go back and put him in a fedora again? What are they trying to do to us?
It's I was just like,
Oh,
and then the second lead of the show is I think his
Jonathan Bailey
Jonathan Bailey, who I don't
from
eh,
Bridgerton.
You've watched Bridgerton, right, Amy? Like,
Yes,
this is
he's
completely
Anthony
made for you.
Bridgerton.
Yes, and he's also very, very beautiful. Like, nobody's at Matt Bomer's level, let's just, like, be honest, but he is also very good looking, so I was like, "This is the most beautiful show I've ever watched."
Yes, and that was what happened. The trailer happened, and I watched. I was like, ha, ho, huh.
Oh.
And yeah, then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna just give it a
At a
shot.
certain point in the show, Allison Williams pops up, and I was like, "Everyone in this show is so hot. I can't deal with it."
So the trailer did its part, the casting did its part, and I'm not ashamed to say that I am a 32-year-old single woman who was like, you know what, this looks hot. I'm gonna watch it and
You
see
know
what
what?
happens.
Why not?
And I've also discovered recently about myself that I think I actually really enjoy political dramas. Um, I
Interesting.
I recently did a whole binge watch of The West Wing. I rewatched Madam Secretary, just finished that
Oh.
rewatch, which is spectacular. The Diplomat with Kerry
I've heard
Russell,
that's great, and Kerry Russell, I mean, can she
excellent.
miss? I think the answer is no.
And Rufus Sewell, who is one of my favorite
Oh. I
actors.
really like him,
Um,
he's so good.
he's really good, and they have really good chemistry. They're also not entirely likable characters,
Ah.
and that makes it very intriguing. So when this one started stepping into the history and the political history, I was like, oh, I think I'm actually really gonna like this. But
Yeah,
I'm here
I
for the
really
connection.
the connection. I really like I mean, I think that's clear that, like, we like period pieces. I
Yeah.
think even Kat likes period pieces. She doesn't like to learn about
Ooh.
history, but we all like period pieces. Obviously, we came from Legends of Tomorrow where they were skipping through
Hmm.
time in different time periods. So I like a good period piece, and they had the little fedoras, they had the outfits. I was like, "Oh, Matt Bomer is wearing that fedora."
And we are intrigued with stories that are gonna tell us about, like we've always been really passionate about queer stories, and I remember when we had our queer representation in media roundtable a couple years ago. One of the things that we had brought up and discussed is that at that time there started to be a lot more female stories or female representing stories, and there weren't a lot of very popular and kind of blockbuster male stories.
That
Um,
I mean, I feel like the sort of the male stories had, like, a moment around, like, Brokeback Mountain where
yes.
they got kind of more popular and more kind of words baity, and then that kind of I don't know, it just didn't take off the way that you would think it would after how
Hmm.
popular, like, that movie was, and then I think I agree, like, it went a little bit more towards, like, the women.
Hmm. And I thought that that was really. I will never forget that point in that conversation because I think it was Phil brought it up that he's like, I wish there was more just gay content. Like like I wish I could see myself in this more. And this show leans heavily into it. And incidentally, this is the one part I am going to spoil for the next few episodes. Did you watch the next couple episodes at all?
So right now I've only watched the first one. I will say I'm gonna spoil our pilot pod by saying I think I'm gonna keep watching. I have, like,
Yeah,
complicated feelings about it, but I think I'm gonna continue on, because
that's exactly where I was.
it's honestly just such a like, even just taking out how good looking all the actors are because they're all very good looking. It is, like, such a beautiful show. It's shot
Hmm.
very well, it's directed
Yes.
very well. The time period is kind of, like, really gorgeous and, like, sumptuous, and, like, I was like, "You know what? Honestly, even even if I don't like the way that the show goes, like, I can just watch. I just like watching it. It's just nice to
Hmm.
watch it."
It is, and we're gonna get into that. But the next episode is either the next episode or the episode after that. Um, his secretary is in a relationship with another woman. And so they
Oh.
actually step into that. So sorry for that spoiler
Oh,
alert.
no, I feel like I picked up on that because at one point so, again, this is for people who watch the pilot or are just interested
Yeah.
in it, right? So we're gonna give away the pilot, but, the pilot kind of straddles these 2 time periods, one in the 50s and the other in the 80s, and, we see his secretary in the 80s, and his secretary is the one calling him about Tim,
Mhm.
his ex, and he says something like, "Give my love to Doris," which seemed I was like, "Oh, okay." And then it
Mhm.
made sense too with the way that she was kind of protecting him and seemed to know what his secret was, and she says at one point when they're at a party, like, "This one seems nice. Like, maybe you're nice to
Mhm.
this one this time."
And I thought that that was one of the more intriguing aspects of this because we have that dual timelines, which I've talked about before, either hits or misses for me in pilots. Dual timelines can frustrate me or they can be done really well. And I think this was just enough of the dual timeline to be in my realm of I really liked that. I liked seeing the dichotomy of the world for those stories in the late 50s versus the 80s and the location of it, Washington, D.C. versus San Francisco. And you're starting to see that challenges are different based on the time periods. Back in the 50s, it's very secretive. We can't talk about it. Literally, our government that we are currently in, Morgan and I are in, were hunting individuals who they considered to be, quote, deviant and subversive. And then in the 80s, we're dealing with the HIV/AIDS crisis, which I actually having just I I was watching ER. I was telling you guys like I was
Oh, yeah.
watching ER, which by the way I only made it through like 5 seasons before I had to cancel my subscription because I'm poor. So
I was gonna ask you how many seasons you made through.
I made it through 5 seasons before I was like, you know
I
what,
can't
I
remember
gotta
what was ER on? Which streaming service? Which of the many streaming services?
Max, HBO
Max.
Max, and
Okay,
that started
that's
that adds up. And I was
it
like, you know
does,
what?
yeah.
I'm like I can have one streaming service at a time, and right now it's Netflix because I made the mistake of watching Peaky Blinders,
Uh-oh.
and now I'm really
Would I
doomed.
like Peaky Blinders? I feel like it's one of those things that
Absolutely.
I feel like people have been talking about Peaky Blinders for years, and I'm like, you ever hear about a show that you know you would like, but you just haven't gotten to yet? That's kind of
That
how I
was
feel about
it.
it.
Yep. And then Cillian Murphy got big again because of Oppenheimer. Not big again, but he started like, I was like, oh, you know, okay. And some clips started popping up on my Instagram, like we've talked about before. And I was like, well, here it is. Now I got to watch it. And sure enough, it is a great decision. Highly recommended. But
Nice.
anyway, all this is to say, didn't finish ER, but in ER, one of the big things that they were talking about as it was filmed in the 90s was the ongoing HIV crisis. So this hit just for me at the same time. I was like, oh, this is reminding me about, you know, how much of a challenge that was in that time period and how it really affected so many lives and
Well,
they're actively telling that story in this show.
yeah. I thought it was really smart how they sort of tied those 2 timelines together with just kind of the idea that, like, the government how what a big impact the government can have on individual people's
Mhm.
lives, and we see that in the '50s when the government is, like, literally looking out for gay people to, like, lose their jobs, get in trouble. And then we see that in the '80s when the government is doing nothing to stop a deadly pandemic because it's affecting people that they mostly don't care about. And I just felt like that was such an interesting kind of commentary, even in the first episode about, you know, the dark side. We see these two guys, they both work in government. At least one of them is idealistic about it.
Mhm.
And you kind of see like, you know, this is sort of the dark side of things. Like the what happens in Washington really does have a huge effect on individual people's lives.
So what's interesting is I did not know this until after I watched the pilot. It's actually based on a book. So,
I saw that too, and I went to look up the book in Goodreads. I think it was, like,
mhm,
published in, like, the early
2007.
2000s? Okay, yeah.
And one of the things that they don't have is that dual story. So it is only the story of the 50s and
Oh,
the 60s. So it doesn't
interesting.
actually expand the story. They expand the story on the TV show. Um and a lot of reviews that you'll read about the pilot talk
Mhm.
about how that makes it more compelling. And I think it does
I think
because
so too.
there's something to be said about watching characters who you know are not going to have the happily ever after.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a wild way to approach a pilot. It's like knowing the character dies in the end, but you're still going to read it all anyway. There's an argument for that's why the newest Hunger Games, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, was
Mhm.
so popular is because everybody knew where it was gonna go,
Yeah, it's
and they
tragic. You
could
go in
watch.
knowing that.
It's a tragic story, and there is something about that sort of Shakespearean tragedy where you know that Caesar is gonna die. Like you
Yeah.
understand the history behind these stories, or knowing the tragedy that's going to happen. It makes it more compelling. So I enjoyed that dual timeline. It really adds a lot to Hawk's character to know that he marries, I think Lucy is her name,
I think so, yeah. His sort of boss's daughter, I
daughter.
think it
Yeah.
is, that they had grown up together and they knew each other for a long time.
And it was very clearly a political alliance. Like it
Yes.
was a well, you're gonna marry my daughter because that's what's expected of us. It was very royalty based, kind of, this is the princess, you're the prince, this is what you have to do if you want to make it in this world. And it sets up Hawk's character right away, that he is the kind of character that is not that he is going to color within the lines of the kind of paint by number that he drew, and he's not going to be willing to cross certain lines, and he's going to do certain things. And so when he meets Tim, and Tim is this bright-eyed, shiny, oh my gosh, I think I'm falling in love with this guy, it's really kind of, I loved watching the story fall apart, where what's going to happen with Hawk. You know where he's going. You know the kind of person he is almost right away. And you're
Yeah.
watching Tim discover that. And it is tragic to see that happen.
Yeah, I feel like one of my issues with the pilot, and is it not so much an issue of like the story or the storytelling, but like I found it hard to like the two main characters. I feel like,
Really
yeah, because I feel like
interesting.
Hawk, so Matt Bomer's character
Mm-hmm.
is so like repressed and so emotionally unavailable to everybody that it's hard to get a read on him. And Tim, who is Jonathan Bailey's character, is working excitedly for the very people who are trying to oppress him. So for me, it was tough. It was like, I want to root for you guys, but you want to work for Joseph McCarthy?
I think I think part of that is where our history makes it difficult to take ourselves out of the story, because if I understand the timeline of the pilot correct, it is not until the very end, when the executive order is announced, that becomes clear that the government and McCarthy are hunting for, quote, deviants and subversives. So up until then, McCarthy was only anti-communist for Tim.
But I think you could make the argument that McCarthy was kinda never a good guy. Like,
Yeah.
his like,
Yeah.
the Red Scare was not, like, arguably much better than the Lavender Scare, which is what they kinda call
Mhm.
when they start trying to, like, root out all the LGBTQ people from the government,
Mhm.
because, they would just accuse people of being communists sort of willy-nilly, even if, like, maybe they just, you know, did it even matter did it even matter
Mhm.
if that was their political belief? They seem to think that, like, that everybody was trying to overthrow the government. They got so crazy about, like, "We gotta get rid of communism," that it just became a straight witch hunt. And
Mhm.
it's so interesting that, we were watching this because I've been watching a lot of, like, a lot of comfort watching I Love Lucy, and I was looking up, something about that movie that came out where Nicole Kidman played Lucille Ball, and I was like, "No, thank you. I'm not interested." I love Nicole Kidman, not as Lucille Ball.
Uh-huh.
Um, but apparently a big part of the plot of that movie was that, Lucille Ball got, wrapped up in the Red Scare and had to, like, go testify
Really?
before McCarthy because she was a registered Communist Party member. Because her grandfather, like, really believed in that, and she had maybe had some meetings at her house,
Huh.
and so she kind of wiggled out of it, but it was apparently a very scary, period of her life where she's getting, like, cross-examined by Joseph McCarthy, and honestly, the Red Scare did ruin some careers in
Yeah.
Hollywood, not just careers in the government.
Yeah, the Red Scare is a very like I saw Goody Proctor with the devil witch
Yep.
hunt. Like
It's
it's
100%. It's like Salem witch trial kind of stuff.
it
And
really
you
is.
can even see the way that they set it up in this episode where they're basically like encouraging people to snitch on each other with like
Mm-hmm.
almost no evidence too. So you could think that like I mean how people in Washington especially like how would they use that? You know, you've got kind of like a get out of jail free card to just like, torpedo a political opponent maybe.
Or even in the case of the episode where you're talking about how you found it hard to find Hawk likable, we'll get back to Tim's character
Yeah.
because I disagree on that one. But I agree on Hawk. I agree Hawk's very difficult because, again, he's got this code that's his alone where he's not willing to out Tim, but he's totally cool outing Ed and putting
Yeah.
him in jail. And he says he does it to protect Tim. Like, he's like, we got to do this to protect you. But it's just, as he describes it, that's just Washington, bro. Like
Mhm.
that's how you have to live in this town. And I do think that as much as he's unlikable because of it, I think that sets the pilot up nicely for understanding what sort of world you're in. And I
Well,
don't
I think
think
it's also interesting that the way that they set up this whole world is to lean into what the hypocrisy was actually like back then because
Mhm.
the same people who are witch hunting all the gay people in the government are gay, which
Mhm.
is crazy. It's one of those things like you are literally oppressing yourself. Like no one told you to do this. You're doing it on your own. But Roy Cohen, who is, and it's also really interesting because I did some Wikipediaing
Uh-huh.
after I watched the pilot. It's interesting how, everything that's old is new again. Everything, history does really impact and inform the present because Roy Cohen, who is the lawyer that's helping out McCarthy, it was a mentor to Donald Trump. So, and also a lawyer to several mob bosses. So, I mean, like, just overall not a good guy. But also died of AIDS. So this is and these are the people who are architecting this like lavender scare witch hunt to try to out people in the government.
Which goes back to Hawk being like, I got to protect myself by putting as much blame on everybody else. Because if I'm out here being like, no, this is bad, no one's going to accuse me of having been that person. So like it makes sense, but it's such a complicated world. I was immediately endeared to Tim in this show. And I think part of that is the way that Jonathan Bailey plays him.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's why I had complicated feeling like, I feel like I had more complicated feelings about Tim because on the surface, he's kind of got that, like, type of, like, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington kinda like, "Hey, I'm gonna change it
Perky.
all." But then, like, the causes he very sincerely believes in is, like, "Let's get all the commies out." And I'm like, "Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay."
And it is one of those things where I would actually be really interested to hear from any listeners who maybe who because we've got listeners who are, every age. I would love to hear anybody who lived during that time period or the Red Scare or the idea of that because it I do wonder like how much you look at propaganda nowadays. But
Oh,
what
yeah.
about in a world where you were just hearing the radio and you're literally listening to uh these quote witch trials on your radio? Like I wonder how much that really drums up people being like communism is real. The Soviet Union is gonna murder us at any moment. Like Tim really truly believes he's fighting against a just cause.
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's definitely there was, like, definitely huge propaganda. I mean, if you think about also the time period of, like, the '50s and, like, the McCarthy era stuff, it wasn't that long after World War II. I mean, probably 10, 15 years, maybe 20 at the most. No, I mean, maybe not even, I think. It was, like,
I think
maybe
it's
10
59.
years?
So we're looking at 10
Oh,
to 15
59.
years.
Yeah,
Yeah,
10,
I
15
think it's
years.
59.
Because it
Um
sounds like, Matt Bomer's character was in the war, right? He was like a war
yes.
hero, because one of the
Yes.
characters says that he's lucky because he's a war hero, so he's, like, bulletproof,
Mhm.
because that means that nobody would look at him.
Speaking of looking, I don't know if you guys are watching the live stream. My dog and
Oh,
my cat are playing together on the camera behind
they're
us,
having
and
the best time.
it's pretty cute actually. They're just oh, there you go. Now my dog sat down and chilled. My cat's like, "Come on, man, I want to play." So let's look at the kind of the structure of the episode. So you've got and we'll talk about maybe the cinematography and the beauty of the episode because I agree. I think it is a very pretty episode to watch. The cinematography, the way that they did some musical sequences, montages, I thought that it was very, for lack of a better word, piloty, but in a good way.
Yeah. It was very
What were some of the
cinematic
moments
the
that
way that
stood
it was
out for you?
shot too. Oh, yeah, just I really liked like some of the shots of him going up to like Tim's apartment and like being in that like little ratty apartment, and then when later we see the change when Tim goes to his very nice Washington apartment.
Yep. Which struck me immediately as I was like, well, that's a Matt Bomer thing. Of course, Matt Bomer's character has the fancy stuff.
Right, of
I'm like,
course.
Tim gets just chicken noodle soup. And that's all I get. I really liked a lot of the driving sequences. I liked the kind of bright and shiny world that they created. And if you really look at it, the areas that are the most vibrant in the pilot are the areas that are the most secret.
Mhm.
So the moment where like that underground like gorgeous club that they have is bright and gold and glittery, and it's got all of those bright colors, and those are the things that are supposed to be the most hidden, and yet that is the most vibrant scene in the whole show. And it gets us a chance to know some of the other characters that it sounds like we're not actually in the book, that they just brought in to make a
Oh.
little bit more to add on many different levels more color to the show. So you've got I believe the journalist's name is Marcus.
Yeah, I
Um
couldn't remember what the journalist's
mhm.
name was, but yeah, I liked the addition of him because he also bridges the 2 timelines. He's kind of the person who
Yes.
starts the pilot, and then later on, Tim is talking to him about Hawk, and
Mhm.
how their relationship to sex is similar because they like to love him and leave him, you know? They don't like to get attached.
Mhm.
And then they go to the club together. Now, I can't remember, Amy, you didn't watch, A League of Their Own, did you? The
No, I did not.
Amazon Prime show? I think that was
Mm-mm.
just me and Kat. But it was really interesting because, they go to a very similar bar in A League of Their Own, and A League of Their Own takes place in, I believe, like, the 30s or the 40s? I think it's yeah, like, sometime around there. So it's a little bit earlier than even this show, but they go to, like, like, an underground hidden gay bar in A League of Their Own, and it has a very similar vibe to it, and I was like, "Oh, this is so cool to kinda see this sort of atmosphere again in this
Mhm.
show."
I really liked that, and I liked I liked the costumes. I liked getting a chance to see the world that they're creating, and it continues. That club becomes a focal point for the next couple episodes. So does the
Nice.
journalist. His story is actually get his story is very compelling because in addition to being a gay character, he is a character of color, and that is one of the most challenging aspects of his career at that time.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially we see a little like a hint of that in the pilot, because when Tim meets him for the first time and they're kind of talking about Hawk and he introduces himself, Tim immediately goes, "Oh, the black paper."
And they
Which
step into it a couple times. They talk
yeah.
they the next episode or two they really start to dig into what it means to be about black journalist in that time period. And it's about as not great as you think it is.
Yeah, I imagine it would be. And so, yeah, you kinda get to see some of, like, the intersections of, like, identity because he's not just gay, he's also black, and he's also in
Mhm.
Washington as a journalist, so I could see how a lot of those things are not great during the
And
'50s, especially.
yeah, it is you are correct. It's not great. um so the last thing that I want to talk about, we're going to talk about the spicy stuff because
Oh,
we got to talk about the spicy stuff.
yeah.
So here's the thing, it's Showtime. They got to show everything. First off, I loved that right off the bat Hawk's character is very clearly a dominant personality.
Yeah.
In the bed, he is taking control of everything in the bedroom, in his life, on the battlefield. That is the character that he is. Um, so even when Tim gets a little foothold to take control, that's when you actually see Hawk really start to quote enjoy himself. And there's that one scene where he's like, I want to go to the party because I'm your good boy. And he's like, how much do you want to go? And Tim's like, I want to go, yeah. Which I
That was the
actually did.
scene where I screamed out loud because, I don't like feet. Uh
Me neither. Me neither. I was like, oh, don't make me not like this.
The funny thing is, like, out loud in my apartment, like, by myself, I yelled, "Oh, no, not in the mouth." Don't do please don't do that. It was so hard to watch. I was like, "Oh, no. No,
I
no."
know. And feet not my thing either. To people who feet, you know what?
Good. I'm not gonna yuck.
Respect.
Nobody's yucking anybody's yum. Not for us, though. Not for us.
Not for us. But the irony is there's the moment where it's leading up to it and the camera pans back and Matt Bomer's head goes back on the headrest
Mhm.
and he makes this like sound. And that was actually the exact moment in the trailer where I was like, I gotta watch this show.
It was the foot scene. You didn't
The
know.
foot scene, I was obviously once he got past the feet.
Yeah, okay.
Um, but I went and I watched an interview
Mhm,
with Matt Bomer and Jonathan Bailey, who are both um out as gay.
mhm,
And they both talk about playing characters who they are representing themselves. And they were talking about filming the intimate scenes because the intimate scenes, you have the physical intimacy and you have the emotional intimacy. And both of them talked about how finding the emotional intimacy was actually more difficult than finding the physical intimacy, but that the two of them trusted each other so well that it made the scenes very honest.
mhm.
And I have not done anything near as quote big as this, but I have done intimacy scenes um actually a lot this past summer in Shakespeare's Macbeth. It was a very
Oh,
spicy
y
Macbeth.
oh, yeah. Oh, yeah,
Um
I was gonna say the Macbeth
yeah,
probably, yeah.
Macbeth, as Lady Macbeth and Lord Macbeth, in our version, um, sex and intimacy was one of the ways that these two characters was one of the only way that these two characters found a way to connect, and it actually becomes a little bit of a crutch when she uses sex or he uses sex to get things that they want, and what happens when that doesn't work. And so it was very fun and complicated, but it was a lot of intimacy scenes, and you recognize how much trusting your scene partner creates a safe space to play and creates real honest emotion, on and off camera or on stage. And so they were talking about how as they were filming the first couple episodes, it actually, that level of trust that grew between them mirrored the relationship between Hawk and Tim, and actually let them sort of grow to discover their characters as they were going to discover themselves as actors. And I really appreciated it because you can see it. You
Yeah,
can tell how carefully and honestly they worked with each other to create really powerful intimacy scenes. And as someone who I've said it before, I enjoy reading smut. I love reading books that have that kind of stuff in it. I'm the kind of person, I love spicy scenes in movies, but because I am passionate about it, because I've acted in them, and because that's just my like escapism. I love reading smut for escapism. I don't mind saying that publicly.
it's
Real life is
fun.
crazy, y'all. It's fun. Fantasy smut especially. Woohoo! If there's fae in it, I'm happy. But
Give me a
it
sexy fairy.
does. Does he have wings? I'm here for
Even
it.
better.
Even better. But it means that I'm very sensitive to bad sex scenes or
Which
bad
there are
smut.
many. There are
And there
many
are so many
cheesy, not
where you're like,
good.
that's just two
Ooh.
people kind of off
Yeah.
state, and it's not what I'm looking for.
And I will say also, sometimes you'll be watching something and you'll be like, "These are the 2 most attractive people I've ever seen." They are not into each other in any way whatsoever. There is nothing. There's no chemistry. It's just it's like, "Eh." And, thankfully, this is not the case in this. This is completely well casted. Matt Bomer and
Mhm.
Jonathan Bailey have great chemistry, the really, really good chemistry. And I think that's really, really important for this story where it's there. First off, they have to be hidden. So you've got that layer. And second of all, Hawk's character is very like emotionally stunted and emotionally like withholding.
Mhm.
So for us to get invested in this relationship that feels one-sided in the beginning and also has to be hidden, like that chemistry has to be smoking and
Mhm.
whoo, it was.
It makes a huge difference, and that level of chemistry and that level of trust shows on screen. I'm very much enjoying the Patreon chat right now, where one of our YouTube listeners, CB Cube, says, I enjoy smut as well. And you know what? I would like to demystify people who enjoy smut.
We're
Okay,
all friends
that's what
here.
we're all friends here. That's what Book Talk and Bookstagram is all about. I I love ladies who are talking about, you know what? I love reading this. My favorite trend is recently there have
Mhm.
been a lot of girls getting their boyfriends into reading smut.
Yes.
And first off, there's the comedic side of it, where the boys are like reading the scenes and you watch their face be like, what? Like for instance, hold on. So they're like, right, okay, they're like reading the scene and they look at it and they go, oh God, you like that? You want me to growl? I can growl. Um, um but then
Do
but
you
then
want me to be a
also,
Sarah J. Maas hero? I could do that.
dude, okay, you guys can't see it unless you're watching the video. This book, a court of silver flames, to all men out there. Be Cassian. Be Cassian.
This is the guidebook. I have to read
This
that is
is the
on my
guidebook.
list.
It is though.
I
It,
don't know if this one's spicy, but I have hearing a lot about Fourth Wing. Have you read Fourth Wing, Amy?
I have not yet. I know it is a tragedy that I have not yet read it.
I hear
That's
it's
because I'm knee
great.
deep in Throne of Glass. It does get smutty. The second one gets even smuttier, is my
Oh,
understanding.
okay.
But I gotta tell you, Court of Silver Flames. What's so funny is it's
It
the
that book is
hardcover is orange.
massive.
Yes, first off, it is massive. You will love it. But that one of the TikTok trends that was going around is like, gentlemen, would you like to know what your lady is looking for? There is a reference book. It's the orange one.
It's the orange. That's so
It's the
funny.
orange one. But all this is to say that because this is becoming, like I that's just something that I think is fascinating to read, and it's a lot of fun. It means you're sensitive to when things don't go as planned, or I'm sensitive to poorly written smut.
Yeah,
I watch scenes and you're like, that was pretty bad, or you or go, those characters don't actually have chemistry, and it
yeah,
makes or
you can
breaks a
tell on
book.
the page as well, I will say,
Yep.
like,
You're like,
when they don't you're like, I still don't understand why these people like each other." It's not the screen is much more evident, though, when you're like, "Ugh," and it's not always people who don't like each other in real life either, like, sometimes you see, like, actors who are married and they get on screen and that chemistry is just not happening. It's not
mhm.
translating, you know?
But I think that that's what makes this one of the parts of this story so clearly well thought out, is that yes, you've got the physical attraction between these two characters, but then they're going to grow into an emotional attraction, or are they? And that's
Yeah,
this kind of leads into the last discussion point, which is, you have not watched Beyond. I've watched a couple episodes beyond this,
I've only watched the
and
first.
it does start to step into the real big challenges of how hard it really is to be these kind of characters in that world. You do start to see more of the 80s timeline, and it's actually um pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah.
It's extraordinary, and I've not finished the series. It is a limited series. It's not a, like, there's not going to be a season 2, but I did hear that the finale was pretty
I
insane.
I've seen that as well, that the finale is
A
pretty
lot.
brutal.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you could even see that in one of the scenes that I really liked is in the 80s timeline where Hawk goes to go see Tim. Tim is dying of AIDS, and he lives in San Francisco now. And Hawk is sitting in this cafe waiting for Tim to hopefully call him back and tell him it's okay to visit. And he looks out the window at all of these gay couples, these men who were openly gay and just walking down the street and being gay, a thing that like he couldn't have imagined back in, the late 50s. And I just thought that that was like that scene was so powerful of him being able to watch like, two guys who were in a relationship kiss on the sidewalk, a thing that like they were scared to do like in their apartments, without music on basically. And it was just like such a good illustration of, you know, how things had changed in the timeline, but also like how different choices can lead you to different
Mm-hmm.
places because those people had chosen, at a certain point to take that risk to, obviously not walk an easy path and but be their true authentic selves.
And you see that there's two different paths that Hawk took, and you actually see. I think there's that level of regret that Hawk has, and I would really encourage you to watch the next couple episodes. I really would like to go finish the series now that I have resubscribed to Paramount Plus for $12 for a month. Um,
So now you can finish though.
now I am gonna finish it off. But I really enjoyed the pilot. I knew at the end when he was in the cafe, I was like, the damn phone's gonna ring. I was like, that was
It's
such a
gonna
good
ring.
pilot ending. The phone's gonna ring and they're gonna cut to black. And sure enough,
I
they did.
I like that when the phone rings, he smiles. Like I feel like just from based on the pilot, there is a certain amount of I think you mentioned that he always sort of has the upper hand.
Yeah,
And I think in that moment you see that version of Hawk again where he's like, I knew it.
I knew he'd call.
I knew he'd come back. I
He'd
actually
call.
will say one of the other things that really intrigued me about the pilot and when it made me kind of want to through the whole season, especially since it's only 8 episodes, is
Yep.
when he's packing to go to San Francisco and his wife is like, "Was it him? Is he dying?" And then you
She
realize, like,
knows.
yeah, she knows, and he says something like, You're, the only one for me," and she says, "If that was true, you wouldn't be going." And it's just like that made me so intrigued about, like, what their relationship is like because in the pilot, we see them they're very friendly, like, it seems like they're old family friends, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, how do they end up together basically? Like how complicit is she? Like how much did she know going in? Did she only learn it like while they were, I wanted to kind of know
Mm-hmm.
more about their relationship as
Yeah,
well. So I
agreed.
was like, okay, this is super interesting. Like all the characters are kind of really clicking for me.
Yeah. I think it's really intriguing and it kind of keeps up the same story. And you'll learn more about he wanted to say Hunt. You'll learn more about Hawk. And I would be intrigued to know if you still like him in a couple, or if you're still like on the I don't like him train in a couple episodes.
Ah.
I think he's definitely a more morally gray character, and I think it's very intriguing to see where his character goes. So, anything else you want to share about the pilot? I think Kat would be
You
okay
know
with this
what?
pilot.
I think so too. I thought that maybe she might struggle because I'm not saying that it was like boring, but I think the
Mm-hmm.
pacing of the pilot was a little bit more slow and like relaxed and like they weren't just like trying to shove in a bunch of information.
Mm-hmm.
It's honestly we talk about this a lot about how piloty does a pilot feel and I had to say that I didn't think this pilot felt very piloty to me.
Agreed.
Like we were introduced to characters but maybe it's because a lot of these characters are historical and they just like they're not going to hold your hand on who Joseph McCarthy is or like, stuff like that. But it didn't feel like, sometimes in a pilot, a character will be like, well, you would know, you're my brother. And you're like, what? What? Why would you say that to your own brother? And there wasn't any of that in there. So
No,
I felt like maybe because of the slower pace, Kat might have struggled a little bit.
I think she would have enjoyed the character growth of it, but it's interesting. The way you're describing it, it kind of feels like a short story. It felt like a
It did.
complete short story because you could end that could be it. It is a 1 hour short story, and it ends with the phone ringing, and you, as the audience, get to guess whether or not the top fell over or kept spinning. Like, does
Yeah,
he call or is it somebody else?
I really do when I was watching it, I think I described it earlier as cinematic. I could absolutely see a little bit of a padded out version of this being a movie, and, like, a pretty successful movie too.
Yeah.
It looks beautiful, the performances are great, the writing is really sharp, like, I
Mm-hmm.
really think that I mean, it's really well done. I was watching it going like, "This is really well
Yeah.
done." Like, do I always love the characters? Maybe not, but, like, I just wanna look at this show. I just wanna
Yeah.
keep looking at this show. It's so beautifully shot. It's the time period so the time period because of the time
The
period and they all work
fedoras.
in government, everybody's dressed real sharp, you know?
Yeah. Sure are.
Everybody's looking real good. Matt Bomer, his little fedora.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree, and I think that's why the Showtime did good in making it only 8 episodes. I think there's something I'm loving more and more miniseries. That's it. It's a limited run. They're not doing any more. There's no sequel. That is the story, and I really like that.
I do like that because I feel like the story tends to be tighter too. You don't get as much sort of fluff as they're
Hmm.
trying to figure out like is this especially I feel like especially in streaming nowadays where a show back in the network days you would have these fun filler episodes because they had to do so many of them and it wasn't that big of a deal but now with the streaming you might get two seasons or you and that might be it. And so it feels like sometimes the streaming shows don't know how much filler to put in, how much
Hmm.
plot to put in, and so you're just like, "What's going on?" But if it's a limited mini series, like, they know the start, they know the end, they know how to get there, and they're not trying to, like, extend things to make it work for a season 2 or, like, throw in a last minute spoiler at the end to be like,
Yeah.
"Alright, come back next time."
It's almost like trying to sell a standalone novel instead of a this is a series that's going to have 5 books in it or a trilogy, and they're like, you know what? I think I
Yeah.
just want the standalone.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so we're gonna
sometimes
start.
you just want that.
You just want the standalone. All right, we're gonna wrap up. Thank you to all of our listeners for joining in. If you have any thoughts about fellow travelers, if you're gonna talk about the finale, please, I'm not kidding, put spoiler alert
Yes,
in
please.
your email train because I really
And
want to
then
do it. So you
and
can
then
email
we'll
us.
maybe if you have watched the whole
Mm,
season and you have ideas, put spoiler alert in the subject,
subject line.
and then I think both Amy and I are likely to finish it. So maybe we'll do
Yeah.
like a Patreon exclusive or something on what we thought of the whole season, and then we'll
Mm-hmm.
read your feedback. But don't spoil us before that.
Or put the spoiler alert.
Like
So
spoiler
our
alert,
email.
Tim dies. It's like, yeah, we know.
You're like, I know. So it's the legendary ladies at gmail.com, patreon.com/ the legendary ladies. Twitter is legends_podcast. Instagram is the legendary ladies. You can find us on podcasts. You can find us on Stitcher. Did I say one of those wrong?
I was gonna say, it looks like we actually have we have some an email from Daryl.
Ooh.
This is about the last episode that I missed that was about Friends and Family Christmas, the Hallmark Christmas movie. Daryl says, "I'm surprised no one mentioned that Ali Liebert had a connection to Legends of Tomorrow since she was in season 1,
Well,
which
that's
I
why
completely forgot."
we have discounted season one as not actually
I
the
I
Legends of
I
Tomorrow.
I feel like is wasn't did she play, like, a nurse that, like, Sarah romanced or something? That
I
is
have no
the vague
idea.
recollection in my head, but, if anybody wants to ping us on a various social media network and let us know what she played in season 1. I feel like it was a nurse who Sarah had a romance with, but I could be wrong.
That sounds right.
Daryl goes on to say, "Will Amy reveal her top 5 Christmas movies in a later episode?" Amy, do you
uh,
have
I
5
don't have my
Christmas movies?
top five. I picked
Okay.
three.
Do you have your
And
top 3?
in no particular order,
Okay.
it's the Winona Ryder Little Women,
Oh,
A
such a good
Muppet
one.
Christmas Carol,
A classic.
and Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, which
Harry
is
Potter!
100% a Christmas movie. So those are
You're a
my
wizard,
three.
Harry.
You're Wizard Harry. Happy Christmas, as
I love
Hermione
that you could
says.
only get to 3.
I don't. I
You should have
this is.
seen Cat's List, though. Cat's List was wild, Amy. Cat's List was wild.
I don't like stuff like Elf. I did like the Polar Express. I could put Polar Express on there, but
See,
like I, it
it's so
is.
funny. I'm terrified of the Polar Express. Have I told you
Oh,
about
because of
this?
the animation.
Yeah, the uncanny valley of the Polar Express. I can't
Mm-hmm.
do it.
Oh,
Tom Han
really?
it looks like Tom Hanks, but it's not Tom Hanks. It's like it like throws my brain into a
You're like,
conundrum. I'm
oh,
like,
nope.
"Oh no."
Yeah, no, I could understand that. I watch Little Women every year. That's my Christmas
Ah,
tradition.
Little Women's
Because if you
so
have not
good.
seen the Winona Ryder Little Women, the first half of the movie takes place in like over like the course of like 3 Christmases. So it's
Yeah.
very wintry and Christmassy and Christmas ball and holly and ivy and Christmas
Did you
trees
see the
and
did you
it's
see
very cute.
the newer Little Women?
I have not, and that's almost
Amy,
on
I think you
principle
would
because I
really
love
like
Winona
it.
Ryder so much.
I think you
But
would
I
really
know I
like
should
it
watch it.
though.
I
Yeah.
probably will.
I ended up really enjoying it and I love little like the novel and I love the Winona Ryder version. So,
Hmm. It's on my
Little
list.
Women's
So
just a great.
there are my top three. I can go more into detail later. But yeah, Morgan, what do you got going on? And then we'll wrap up.
Sure. You can catch me as a co-host on Supergirl Radio, where next week we are doing. We're going to cover one of the DC animated films, and I know what it's called, but it's not in my brain right now. So I believe it just came out. I think it's like the newest Crisis animated film, but I could be lying. It's an animated film. Anyway, you should check us out on the DCTV podcast YouTube channel. We go live at 9 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday nights. And you can join us in the chat and say hello and say, Morgan forgot the name of this movie on the Legendary Ladies podcast. And I will say, indeed, I did.
Indeed, you did.
What about you,
And
Amy?
you guys can find me on Instagram, Amy_hip. I am currently doing the San Diego rounds of auditions for theater for summertime. So if anyone has any auditions you want me to come to, please let me know. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot going on right now other than working so many hours.
Ah, no fun.
So many hours because it's to pay the sunshine tax of rent. If you guys
Yeah.
don't know, San Diego was recently voted the most expensive place to live in. Not voted. It was proven the most expensive place to live in America. Based on
Really?
rent, more
More
than San
than Los
Francisco, more than the Bay
Angeles?
Area. Oh yeah, all of that.
Holy
Like
moly.
based on gross income versus rent, we are the top.
Oh,
Um,
because the incomes
it's
probably aren't adjusted the way they are in, like, San Francisco, where,
mhm.
like, whatever job you get is, like, 6 figures.
Yeah, and so it's a problem. And yet, the last week, while the rest of the country, including my mother, have been slipping on ice and shoveling snow and
It's
all that
quite cold
jazz,
here.
it's been it like the days start out cold. Like we will San Diego because we're a Mediterranean climate, et cetera, et cetera. We will get down to the 30s in the morning. So between
Oof.
4 to 7 a.m., you will be at the 30s and 40s range, and I'm out working in that. But then it gets nice, and for a majority of the day, it's sitting at about 65 degrees and sunny, just enough for a
Ah.
light sweater or vest. And it's been great. So I was like, you know what? This is where my sunshine tax comes into play.
Yeah,
So
seriously.
yeah, that's why I work 6 jobs is so that I am not
It's
freezing and
actually gonna
shoveling
snow
snow.
here tomorrow, so that's the weather sounds hard, Amy.
Well, that's gonna wrap it up. Thank you to all of you guys for joining us. Thank you to our patrons who joined us in the chat. If you guys have anything you'd like to share, feel free. Again, you can subscribe on YouTube, Instagram. No, can't. You
Yeah, you
could
can. I mean, you
actually.
could if we had that
You could
function,
pay
you could have,
us.
but you could just follow us.
Yeah, that's great. And if you like what you're listening to, leave a 5-star review on iTunes
Yes,
and
definitely.
subscribe on Stitcher and all that jazz. So thank you all so much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this pilot pod. Our next one is coming up very shortly. So stick around and stay legendary.